Hi everyone, I'm Angie Spong and I'm putting together a series of projects for machine embroidery. To purchase the project, please go to my website at www.angies.co.nz, and you can also follow me on Facebook at Angie's Machine Embroidery. Hope you enjoyed this presentation.
This is my pencil case project with a lovely embroidery design that goes all the way around the case. When you've been to my website to purchase the project, you will immediately get an email with files attached for your embroidery designs, instructions and patterns, and you will have chosen either your A4 or letter size paper. The PDF files, you can just double click on those to open them, then click on your print button and your print window will open. Do make sure that you set your page scaling to none. Use your little down arrow here to select none. That will ensure that you get your pattern pieces printed in actual size. So click OK here and your patterns will print out. Here's your pencil case pattern printed out. So all we need to do now is to just cut this around the outside line. Do just note that this says place on fold here. The fabric lining that I'm using is a quilt fabric, so it's cut on the fold here. So that's the lining piece. I've also cut two little tabs out of the lining fabric as well. The tabs can be done in webbing, which makes it nice and easy, as I've done on this one. The main fabric for my pencil case, I'm using a cotton canvas fabric which has got a nice lot of body in it. Then I'm going to fuse this on the back. This is a cotton giggly interlining which is nice and stiff. They use it for shirt collars. When you're pressing that on, to fuse it, do put your iron in just the one spot for 15 to 18 seconds so that you make sure that the glue will really adhere to the fabric. We only just need to just fuse the center section of the giggly onto the fabric where the embroidery is going to go, because after we've done the embroidery we're going to trim this giggly back to the stitching line so that it's not in the seams. Now we've got that all set to go, we can start our embroidery. I'm using my FAF Creative Vision for doing the embroidery. As you can see, I've added the name Samantha to the name box there, which I did on my computer in the 5D software. Got lovely fonts in there, so it was lots of choice. Saved that onto my embroidery stick, plugged it into my USB port here on the machine and just brought that one up. Also you can see over here that I have changed my needle plate to the single hole needle plate. This gives a much more even tension on the back of your embroidery. You can see I've got my dynamic D6 foot on there, which has just got the little circular bit at the bottom of the foot, so that gives nice support to the embroidery when it's stitching. And I've got my embroidery needle in, size 90. Add my bobbin fill on the bobbin. Then for your thread up the top here, the thread stand works really well for your top thread. The thread can unwind nice and evenly, and it also makes sure that the thread is relaxed before going through your thread keepers on the machine. Here's a little tip for you on this machine. I like to lift up that top thread spool with its big keeper on the top there, bring the thread behind that before going through the keepers there on the machine. This makes sure that whichever spool stand you use on the back here, you're still going to get the thread going straight into that first thread keeper. So we're all set to start embroidering. I'm using the 360 by 200 hoop so I can do this embroidery design just in the one hooping. This I've hooped up with a tearaway only, and put all my hoop clips on around the edge. Those hoop clips are really good because they keep your tearaway nice and taut. So So all I've done with my fabric now is to just fold that in half and just mark the midway point at the bottom. I've done the same at the top, folded in half this way as well, and marked both sides. Place your fabric underneath the foot and just put those marks you've done to match up with your notches on the hoop at the front and at either side. There we go. Then we're ready to embroider. Let's go into embroidery mode, and I'm going to just tack around the fabric to hold it on the tear away. Now some machines that'll be your basting function or fix or trace, so just do that in your first thread colour. Just keep an eye on your fabric to make sure that it's sitting nice and straight. So this is a really easy way of doing your embroidery. All I've done, as I said, was to just hoop up the tear away, then place your fabric on the top, baste around the fabric, and then you're ready to embroider. So that's just finishing off there now. So we can start embroidering our first thread colour, which is that all over motif of your design. There we go. As you can see, the embroidery is progressing here. I'm loving the variegated thread I've put in this one, and you can see the embroidery is just skirting around the name box now, and it'll continue down and fill in as it goes. Thread colour 2 is just a triple stitch border right the way around the outside edge of the motif stitching, and I'm just doing that one in the same colour, so just stitching that one on now. Thread colour 3 is your satin stitch border that makes the frame for the name that you've put in the design. Just finishing off the fourth colour now, which is the name. There we go. Finished. Fantastic. That looks brilliant. Now to take it out of the hoop. This is my finished embroidery. I've just removed all of my hoop clips. Now I can take my work out of the hoop and remove the tear away. When I've done that, I will then just unpick that row of tacking stitches that are around the embroidery design. Now that we've got our embroidery design finished, we need to cut out our fabric to the pattern. I have printed out my paper pattern twice so I can get a complete pattern piece. Just stuck it together along the place on the fold line here. You could also print this out on transparency sheets, then you would be able to see the design through your pattern. Line the design up with these little corners here on the left hand side and the right hand side and get it sitting straight. Then you can get your fabric marking pen and draw a line all the way around the outside edge. That's just to make sure that we've got the pattern sitting straight on the embroidery. Now I'll be able to cut this out with my rotary cutter. I'll cut it through on the right hand side here, across the top, down the left hand side and across the bottom. Then get a sharp pair of scissors just to cut these little pieces out on either side. Now we've got our pencil case cut out to the pattern. What I've also done is gone to the wrong side and just trimmed out the seam allowance of your giggly interlining. There's a seam allowance of 1 centimetre, or that's 3/8 of an inch, and I've just cut this all away, all the way around. So now I've just got to fuse these little side pieces back down onto my fabric. When I was taking this piece out alongside the embroidery here, because it's a cotton woven interlining, I was able to actually just tear that away from the stitching. So I could do that here, in this section here and here, along the top and on the two other sides. You might also like to just get rid of any pen lines that are on your work now as well. Now we're ready to start stitching, so set your machine back to normal sewing. If you've used the single hole needle plate for your embroidery, don't forget to put your normal sewing plate back on the machine. I've made the little pull tabs out of fabric for this one, so a little seam down either side, turn it through, give it a press and just pop it there in the position that's marked on your pattern with the raw edges even, one on either side. I've also pinned the zip in place. Being an open-ended zip makes this real easy because I've just pulled the two pieces apart here. Place the zip on your fabric with the right side facing down, and I've pinned this from the wrong side because I'm going to be stitching it from the wrong side, just above the stitching line here of the embroidery. I'll do that with my zipper foot, and I will be moving the tab out of the way as I'm sewing, as you do with a normal zip. Now we've got the open-ended zipper stitched in place, we can insert the lining. Just put your right sides together here and pin the lining in place along the top where the zipper's there and along the bottom. We're going to be sewing the seam through the same stitching line as we sewed the zipper in with, just off the edge of the embroidery. Now we've got our lining stitched in along the zipper stitching lines at the bottom and at the top. I've turned my work through so that the right sides are out and just pressed along those seam lines. Now fold your pencil case so that the embroidery side is in. Just join your open-ended zipper up at the bottom here and close it a short way. Now we're ready to stitch our end seams across here, but I don't want to incorporate the lining at the back here. So I'm just going to flap that back and just pin it out the way. The same with our other end here. We're going to sew the seam across here. I'm just going to turn the lining back and pin that out the way. You will notice that I haven't closed the zipper all the way through. This is because once we've sewn our end seams, we need to turn the work through that gap. I've stitched the two end seams across here, just off the edge of that interlining. I've done this so that when the seam is turned down, it's going to fold nicely. If there's any of the interlining stitched in the seam at all, that's just not going to happen. I've also pressed the seam allowance back on that lining piece there that we had pinned back out the way, ready to fold over my seam. I'm going to pin that in place and just hand sew with a slip stitch across there. I'll do the same at the other end as well. The end seams are all nicely sewn up there now, so all we've got to do to finish this off is to sew the 4 corner seams. Now I've pinned these through. You can just feel where the embroidery comes to, and we need to just stitch off the edge of that. So we've got 4 of those to do. I've pinned those 4, so I'll go to the sewing machine now and stitch those through. I've stitched the 4 corner seams and just neatened the raw edges. Now you can turn your pencil case through to the right side. So we've got our pencil case turned through, and I think you'll agree with me that that's going to make a lovely birthday present for Samantha. The only thing I've left to do is to just pop a spot of glue on the end of the open-ended zipper so that that can never come undone.